Well, good evening. I want to welcome everybody to another Thursday evening Family Promise of the Verdugo's Money Matters session. This is a continuing workshop that in what is becoming a long of personal finance workshops that FPV has been holding for participants and local residents within the community to talk about smart money strategies and to address personal finance, personal money management, and how best to continue making good progress and growth when it comes to managing our personal finances, our household income and expenses, and how we can also have an eye to be thinking long-term, to be doing the best for ourselves with our hard-earned money. So tonight we're going to be addressing cash flow and talking about something new, zero-based budgeting. And in our series in the past, we have talked quite a bit about being sort of very strict and disciplined when it comes to budgeting our monies. And we've looked at various ways to create budgets, manage budgets, and make sure that we're setting smart money goals and using those budgets to achieve those goals, which a lot of our participants have shared with me in the past, that their budgeting, though not flawless and not perfect, has certainly helped them reduce credit card debt, pay down student loans, has given them more discretionary income at the end of the month, and has helped them, pay off some debts that they've had. So budgeting, though we sometimes think of that as a four-letter word, sometimes as a bad word, I think it's helpful for us to be sort of constantly reminded throughout the year to sort of check in with our spending plans, with our budgets. And today I'm going to go over sort of a new strategy. If you've been doing well with your budget, this might be something new to try. And if you haven't budgeted before, this may be a technique that you might find even more sort of helpful for you. So first, before we get into zero-based budgeting, I do want to talk about cash flow for a little bit, because cash flow is one of those sort of tricky parts of personal finance that is difficult to manage. And the reason being is that it requires us to be pretty diligent and vigilant about watching our bank account. And that's something that we don't like to do. We would just much rather swipe, use online bill pay, use sort of easy payments like Apple Pay, things like that. And we just assume that we're going to have the funds in our accounts to make these purchases. And it's sort of tedious to go back, to log in, to go online, to look at an app and sort of see what our current balance is when we're talking about cash flow. But cash flow is a subject that can easily get away from us. It's the part of managing our money that is, I would say, oftentimes the trickiest because we only know half the story. So when it comes to cash flow, there's two parts to that story. There's the income, and we know that part, right? We know that half really well. We know how much comes in every single month. We know when it comes in. We know almost to the exact dollar how much we should be getting in terms of our paycheck, in terms of our direct deposit, in terms of our sources of income. And even if we have variable sources of income, and that sort of changes from month to month, man, we are tracking the dollars that come in like hawks. But the other side of it, where does the money go? That's the side, that's the 50%, the other 50% that we are not good at managing. So as they say, easy come, easy go, right? And we certainly are not watching oftentimes where the money goes. Typically, if we were to have a visual representation of our bank accounts, it sort of looks like this. Our typical cash flow system is one bucket, right? Or one funnel. All of our money goes in, right? And from that, it sort of just trickles out all over the place. we have a bunch of sort of spigots that turn on either full force and money is just flowing out, or some of them are dripping and just sort of trickling. And over time, that eats away at the money that's coming in. And we're using all this money from this one bucket to pay rent, to pay our groceries, our bills, gas every week, to get to work, maybe purchasing things like clothes, taking care of ourselves, that quick fast food lunch. All these sort of bills or expenses are just sort of eating at or leaking away from our cash flow system, right? And so what I wanted to introduce to maybe somebody who hasn't been on a workshop like this before or heard me talk about this is setting up a different kind of cash flow system. Instead of using the one funnel or the one bucket method, right, where all this money sort of leaks out once it goes in, and then whatever is left over at the end of the month sort of trickles out at the end of the funnel. What if we developed a different cash flow system to better manage our money, and more importantly, not ruin or wreck the bills and the expenses that we know we're going to have every single month without fail, right? So rather than just having that one checking account or that one savings account at Wells Fargo or Chase or Citi or wherever you bank, right? What if we set up a cash flow system that looked like this? And this might be difficult to read in this small type here on the presentation slide, but I'll walk you through it here. What if we did this? What if we split our paycheck every month and we split it into two different accounts? For the sake of this example, let's just call it checking account 1 and checking account 2. And both of those accounts, account 1 and account 2, sort of sounds like Dr. Seuss, thing 1 and thing 2. If in checking account number 1, all the money that went into there was a specific amount from your paycheck that was calculated based on your fixed expenses, the bills that you know without fail every month are basically going to be the same amount from month to month. Your rent, your utilities, your auto payment, your car payment, right? Your insurance payments, whether it's medical insurance, life insurance, auto insurance, maybe things you have to do for your kids. You have daycare. Maybe that's the same from month to month on average. Maybe you have debt payments you have to make, student loan payments, a credit card payment, where there's a minimum amount or there's an amount you pay that's the same from month to month. Let's total up all of those fixed expenses, and let's have checking account number 1 contain every month the exact dollar amount to pay those fixed bills, right? So you could see the reason we're doing this is so that we make sure all of our bills are paid every single month and that we have enough funds, right, to pay all of those in a timely fashion, right, and take care of those responsibilities. So we're not falling behind, right? We're not switching every month what bills we pay and what bills we don't pay, right? But we set aside a given amount of our paycheck into checking account number 1, and that account is used to pay our fixed expenses. So that way we never miss a bill, right? In checking account 2, anything after our fixed expenses goes into checking account 2 and can be used to pay for variable expenses, the things that change from month to month. How much we spend on groceries, how much we spend on eating out or fast food, how much we spend on gas, clothing, maybe entertainment, hey, movie theaters are opening back up, so maybe going out for some fun, going to the movies, taking care of pets, going on vacations. All these things are sort of variable and can differ from month to month, right? And so we're separating these different kinds of expenses from our fixed expenses, and we're having a separate account that pays for those variable expenses, right? So that as those things change from month to month, how much or how often we pay for things like that depends on how much is in checking account number 2. But at least what we can do by doing that is we can protect all of our fixed expenses. So we're not robbing of our funds that probably should go to rent, or that should probably go to paying our credit card bill, or that should probably go towards paying daycare, right? We're not robbing from that to maybe eat out, right? And that's where people get into trouble, is that they've mixed together their variable and their fixed expenses every month, because all their money comes into one bucket in one funnel, and all the money goes out from that one funnel. So if I have a bill in the middle of the month that I know is coming, and I know it happens every single month, I won't miss that payment, or I will have sufficient funds, because eating out is not affecting paying that bill. So I often find that a lot of people run into trouble at certain times in the month because they sort of run out of money, and they're waiting for that next paycheck to hit before they can pay for things. Well, that's because they were robbing from their account to pay for the movies, to go to Taco Bell, to grab the Starbucks, right? And now they're jeopardizing being able to pay their bills. So let's separate those in order to manage our cash flow. We know we'll have enough money set aside to pay our fixed expenses, right? And then what we spend for our variable expenses will depend on how much income we have left over after our fixed expenses. And that should be able to tell you how often you could go to Taco Bell, how often you should be going to the corner Starbucks, right? And notice here in the picture that your debit card is only tied to the account with your variable expenses. That's the one that you can spend on randomly when you're out and about, when you're at Target. You get the idea. If we have a debit card attached to our fixed expenses, well, we could ruin paying those bills because we could just go out and swipe that debit card, right? So the funds that our debit card is tied to is on the variable side, not on the fixed side, right? So you could see how we're taking that one account system and we're setting up a money flow system where we now have two accounts, right? And we're protecting paying our bills, and we're only spending on or from our variable expenses account, right? Notice at the bottom, I have two other boxes for all the what if situations. Brian, what if I paid all my fixed expenses? And what if I run out of money to pay for variable expenses? Then I don't have gas money. I don't have food money. What about those? Notice at the bottom, if you have a credit card, we're only going to use our credit card for larger purchases that we can't take care of, perhaps, from our variable expense bucket, right? So resist the urge to be making frequent and sort of random purchases on your credit card, right? And then separate from these two checking accounts, have what I call a curveball account. A curveball meaning oftentimes life will throw us a curve, something that we're not expecting or not ready for, right? So let's have an emergency fund, a curveball account, so that if we need new tires, if the water heater breaks, if we have medical expenses because of an unforeseen sickness, right? The curveball account our emergency fund can cover us, right? And the reason I have that separate from all the other accounts is that the curveball account should be not incorporated with anything else. It should be a separate account, and maybe it's at arm's length so that you can't always be just going to the ATM and pulling from it, right? But maybe it's an online savings account, right? Where it takes a little bit more effort to log in, to have access, to transfer money. Maybe it's a Venmo account. Maybe it's a PayPal account. Just something that is separate, right, for emergencies, or maybe opportunities even. Doesn't always have to be bad things. Maybe you want to be able, you've been working hard and you want to be able to take that 3-day road trip or something like that. Perhaps the curveball account would help with extra funds to cover that. So again, you're not robbing from money that is used to be paying fixed expenses. Okay. Now, I know it's a little bit more sort of work, and it's a little bit more complicated than just having one checking account. But I think it's beneficial because it's going to help you better manage the responsibilities that you know you need to pay for, and do less spending with expenses that tend to sort of, again, steal from the money that we have coming in every single month, right? So I know that oftentimes as soon as we get that paycheck, we sort of, we breathe easy. Now I have some funds. Okay, now I can go out and buy some things. And now I can, go out to dinner and that sort of thing. But while we're doing that, it's using up funds that we know should be used for fixed expenses. So this helps us not just mentally separate, but literally physically separate our paycheck, separating dollars, right, to give a certain number of our dollars a job to pay fixed expenses, and a certain number of our dollars to pay for variable expenses. So this is something that you could potentially try as you want to get sort of more advanced with managing your cash flow. So how does this then connect to our budget, or the type of budget that we use? And how does it help us with maybe implementing zero-based budgeting? Let me show you. So there's a number of different cash flow budgeting sort of tools or plans that we can use. So let's sort of compare these, right? So in essence, a zero-based budget means that every single dollar in your budget is going to be accounted for. So if you earn $3,000 a month, right, the entirety of that $3,000 is going to be managed and accounted for in your budget. So the goal is going to be to use every single dollar. So at the end of the month, you have zero. Now, I know that initially sounds sort of scary. So, okay, wait a second, Brian. You're telling me if I make $3,000 a month, I'm going to budget to spend all of it, all the way down to zero? I'll clarify that in just a little bit. It's not exactly what that means, but that's how it looks, okay? You could try, if you don't want to use zero-based budgeting, and we'll go over that in its entirety in just a second, but I want to show you some other ways that you could budget. You could use the pay yourself budget method. And we've talked about this in the past, where you dedicate money to savings first, and then the remainder is free to be spent how you choose. So this pay yourself first model, I do think is a good option. So what that means is if you get paid on the 1st and on the 15th, when you budget, the very first thing that you're budgeting is not your rent, it's not your utilities, it's not other bills that you have. It's how much am I going to pay myself first, meaning how much am I going to save? Is it $25 a month? Is it $100 a month? What is the amount that you can reasonably save for yourself? Maybe put in the curveball account, put in a cash reserve, a rainy day fund, whatever you want to call it. And then from there, with the remaining amounts, pay all of your fixed expenses, and still have income for your variable expenses, right? That's the pay yourself first model, okay? The other kind of budget that you could try, and I've seen people try to do this, it's actual physical budgeting. So what you would do is you would use cash. And this is sort of becoming more and more difficult, but I do want to mention this. It's becoming more difficult as we move towards being sort of a cashless society. It's almost more difficult at more stores, retailers, locations to use cash than it is to use a card, to use Apple Pay, to swipe something, to scan something, right? But if you want to get very, very disciplined, you could use physical cash and divide that cash into physical envelopes, right? Filled with the exact amount of money that you can spend on any category in your budget. So I've known people to carry around multiple envelopes. They have an envelope for eating out. They have an envelope for groceries. They have an envelope for gas, and so on, depending whatever your categories are. And they physically divide up the actual cash and put that cash in each of those envelopes. So if their budget is to only spend $50 on gas, that's what their budget is. And they try to stick with that because they're physically carrying that cash, and they can see it. They can see it as they spend it. They can see it as they use it, and they can see what they have left, right? Some of us just operate better visually and physically handling the money itself, and not just having it sort of be numbers in an app, right? Or numbers on our statement. So you could try the envelope budget. You could try to go by a rule of thumb budget, which is the 50-30-20 budget, which says that 50% of our income should be used for essentials. And what I mean by essentials is fixed expenses, the essentials of rent, a car payment, insurance for that car, and so on, the essential things that we have to live, to work, to do what we need to do, right? 50%. You could then try to budget 30% for your personal expenses, right? Eating out, getting coffee, hair care, clothing, right? And then the last 20% is budgeted towards savings. Now, a lot of us, especially living in LA, where cost of living is high, basically anywhere on the West Coast, it's sort of hard to save 20% of our income. If that's not doable, maybe you just adjust the ratios, okay? But basically you're working under sort of general umbrellas, right? Or general percentages, if you will, in that budget. And then the last kind of budget you could use is you could establish a budget based on what you value. What is most important to you? Okay, so you choose how you're going to use your money. Obviously, our rent is important. Obviously, certain bills are important to us. But then beyond that, how you save and what you save for, right, is based on what you value. Okay, so you could build your budget sort of based around what you find to be the most important use of your resources. So while one person may save for a vacation, another person may want to give that to charity because they value that. Or maybe somebody is spending extra funds on a pet because they value their pet, right? So sort of basing your budget around what you find to be important. So these are 5 different ways that we can manage and budget our spending plan or our cash flow, right? So what I want to focus on tonight is number 1. zero-based budgeting, because this is sort of a new concept that a lot of people haven't tried out before. So check it out, see if this might be for you, and see if maybe even if not the whole of it is good for you, but maybe you want to try certain parts of it. So here's what zero-based budgeting is, right? This graphic is just a very easy representation of what I mentioned before. We're going to take everything that we make in the month in terms of income, and we should assign every dollar that we've earned to an expense. Every dollar should have a job. It should go to our rent. It should go to gas. It should go to taking the family out. It should go, like, we will, in this zero-based budgeting, take all of our expenses and make sure that every dollar that we earn has a job, so that when we do our budgeting, income minus our expenses, we should get down to zero. So no extra money at the end of the month. Wow, Brian, that does seem very, very scary. So are you saying I'm not saving in this model? No, that's not what I'm saying. So savings could be one of your expenses, right? That is giving a portion of your dollars a job. It's going to go to savings. This portion is going to go to healthcare. This portion is going to go to retirement, right? Basically giving every dollar a job, not just, oh, I hope I have some dollars left. Why? Here's the crux of it. When we assume we're going to have extra dollars, we make decisions during the month to spend sort of out of our control. Not crazy out of control, but out of what we control within the budget, right? We may go out a couple extra times, knowing, oh, I should have some extra dollars at the end of the month. We tend to buy a few more things at Target. We tend to overspend. So the goal of zero-based budgeting is to give every dollar a job, so that we don't ruin our budget by overspending either throughout the month or assuming we're going to have dollars left at the end of the month, which we'll just spend anyways, right? So many of us don't roll those discretionary monies over to the next month and go, wow, I saved $300 this month. That means I'm starting next month with an extra 300. No, we go, wow, I have an extra 300? Really? Great, let's hit up the mall. I mean, that's sort of just the financial psychology and behavior behind how we act as consumers, right? So zero-based budgeting helps us sort of fight against that a little bit and maybe defend ourselves against ourselves and our own psychology, right? So what we bring in any given month minus our expenses, and savings could be an expense, should equal zero. So that means that we're not just leaving things to chance by the end of the month. Every dollar has done a job, even if we're saving it, right? And we just don't hopefully miraculously end up with an extra $300. Okay, with that being said, let's see how this works. Okay, so it's not difficult. It's like doing a simple budget. So in order to create a zero-based budget, first, you have to record your monthly income and expenses. So at the very beginning, I said cash flow is a two-part system, right? Money that comes in and money that goes out. So we, like I said, we know to the dollar how much we should be getting. That's our money. We earned it. We know that, right? I think what most people really need to hone in on to get zero-based budgeting sort of dialed in is, what are my expenses, right? So make a complete list of all of your expenses. And you can see this very simple one here on the left, from rent all the way down to loan payments, wherever their money is going. And this, for this example, there's just even numbers for easy math here, right? So that in the end, what is left over is 0. And we can adjust this budget until income minus our expenses equals out to 0. So how do you get there, right? Because you might say, Brian, every single month, my expenses are way more than my income. Okay, well, then we're going to have to do some adjustments in your expenses. Where can you lower your expenses? Is it eating out? Is it lowering your cell phone bill? Is it changing your auto insurance? Is it, I don't know, maybe implementing that side hustle idea where, I don't know, maybe you've been making, I don't know, baby blankets or something, and you love sewing and you love crafting, and why don't you sell some of those? Make some additional dollars, right? Find ways to boost income and lower expenses until you find that balance, right? Maybe you might need to lower your savings a little bit. You can take care of some of the bills until you get a handle on what you can really save. And that's okay. Maybe you have to delay taking that vacation. That's okay. Until you get the zero-based budget sort of dialed in, right? You might have to make some of those sacrifices. And then what you got to do is number 3, you have to track and optimize your monthly spending. So this is where the difficult part of zero-based budgeting comes in, because you're managing and giving every dollar a job. You have to watch it. You have to track it. Oh, Brian, I don't want to look at this stuff every day. I'm not saying you have to look at it every day. What you probably should ideally do is look back over the week. What happened Monday through Sunday? Just watch your spending habits, right? So if you need to track some receipts, if you need to actually at the end of the week, pull up and log into your bank account and look at all of the transactions, just do a simple accounting of the week, right? You don't have to look at it every day, but find out, oh man, I hit up Starbucks 4 times this week. You can sort of begin to find your patterns, both good and bad. Oh, wow, changed my auto insurance and now I'm saving this amount of money. Great, I can build that into my budget. I totally overspent on lunch this week. I went out more times than I thought. That was not good. I got to watch that. So now you know what to improve on versus every week going, why do I not have enough money? So it's sort of us stepping outside of ourselves to see our behaviors, to see our patterns as consumers, right? So we have to track it. If you can do it on a weekly basis, I'd say, man, that's really good. You're doing that frequently. If you can't do weekly, at least bare minimum, you have to do monthly. You have to look back on the month and see how those 30 days went. And maybe that's where you start, right? Start with tracking things monthly. And then as you see things getting better and you see some habits changing, then that compels you to look on a weekly basis. And then perhaps you do end up finding yourself monitoring things on a daily basis. I think it's in our human nature to be sort of competitive with other people and then with ourselves. And oftentimes when we make things a game, it sort of challenges us to do better. So for example, I think of those fit bracelets, right? Where it tracks your number of steps. So whether it's the fit bracelet or any exercise or fitness watch, Apple Watch, they're all tracking our activity, right? And we sort of get hooked on that. How many steps have I taken today? Oh, yesterday I did 5,000. Today my goal is 10,000. Wow, I hit 10,000. Tomorrow, could I actually take more? Like we sort of get sucked into that sort of competitive spirit of doing better than we did before. And so zero-based budgeting can help you with that as well. And you can use your competitiveness to sort of see, can I do better this week than I did last week? And then it can potentially become a daily thing. So, for example, if you have apps on your phone, whether it's from your bank, whether it's an outside app that tracks all of your money, like Mint or some of these other apps, you can just sort of have your app up on your phone on a daily basis and say, oh, here's my balance. Good, good. I know my balance. And then that sort of turns into, let me see how I've been spending my money. That sort of increased tracking is going to make zero-based budgeting even more successful, right? Because you're going to find that I have enough income, it's meeting my expenses, right? And I'm not going month to month going, am I going to have any dollars left? Am I going to have the ability to save? Am I going to have the ability to pay my bills, right? Because we're laying that out all before, and all of our work during the month is to get to zero, and not get to zero quick, but at the end of the month, be at zero, right? So here's the pros and cons of it. In order to make this work, right? You have to realize, think big goals first. I just want to give every dollar a job. I want to make sure that I'm better managing my money. Top goal, okay? Zero-based budgeting, like I said, it's easy to see exactly where you can save and where you can splurge, just because you have eyes on your budget more often, okay? And like I said, as you track your habits and your patterns, it leaves room for you to actually make changes. So that was one of the things that I struggled with personally for a long time, is when I would have moments in life where I was sort of feeling depressed, I would always make the excuse of, well, you have to have simple pleasures, right? You have to have life's simple pleasures to enjoy life. You got to enjoy life. It's true. But then I would find myself using that as an excuse to overspend. It wasn't until I had to make a conscious decision. Did I just want to keep making that excuse and just go shopping or buy stuff or get more coffee? Or did I actually want to hit some of my financial goals? And once that sort of clicked in my mind that I had to make the decision to improve and change and adapt, it wasn't just going to be getting more money. We always think that's the solution. Well, I just need more money. Not necessarily. It's, we may have enough resources, we're just not managing them correctly, or we could manage them better, right? So it can give us that room to improve because we're monitoring our patterns. The downside, though, is that you can't get it right away. So you can't get frustrated. So sort of like losing weight or going to the gym or whatever exercise goals you have, it's hard at first. And you may not see the progress immediately. You may have to adapt. You may do it wrong 1 month, right? And you're like, this didn't quite work out. I got to zero, but I got to zero really quickly. What that means, though, is go back, review, reevaluate it, right? Like number 2 there in the cons, you have to readjust. You got to crunch numbers, right? So if you can sort of separate yourself from the emotional side of your money and just say, look, right now I'm just looking at numbers and this is math. It's going to give you the ability to readjust things. Now, it will create some pressure, right? And that's why we may not be perfect at it in the beginning, because we have to not give in to that pressure. We have to be disciplined, right? Set some rigid spending guidelines. If it means you hide away your credit cards, if it means you go to cash envelopes, like if you need a combination of those budgeting tools to work with zero-based budgeting, I mean, you might have to employ those methods. Some of us are better at it than others. So we sort of have to get strict about how we manage things. It's amazing how much time and energy we put into other things in our life that we'll become so rigid and strict about. I got to check my social media. I got to check my email. I got to do this. I got to do that. I've got to binge watch. But then when it comes to our finances, yeah, well, we can make any kind of excuse that we want not to deal with that, right? You get the idea. I'll stop sort of lecturing about that. But that's what zero-based budgeting helps us do. It actually helps us deal with the actual math and the physical numbers of it, but it helps us deal with sort of the emotional side of dealing with money as well. So if you think there are parts of zero-based budgeting that you want to try, how do I match up what I make every month with what I spend? And how can I assign every dollar a job so that at the end of the month, I end up at zero, but in a good way, because I've paid all my bills, I've saved, I've taken care of my variable expenses, and now I can do that again in the next month. It's starting to work, right? So I like this idea. It's not for everybody. I'm not saying everybody should do it, but it's one extra tool that you can try as you figure out what is going to be the best way for me to manage my money, and maybe perhaps undo some of those bad money habits that we've sort of fallen trapped to, or that we just sort of get lazy about. And I know that I'm definitely guilty of that. Next Thursday, our next Thursday workshop, not next Thursday, but 2 Thursdays from now on July 8th, 6 p.m., I'm going to talk about the biggest money myths. And in this particular topic, we're going to address sort of what are the biggest things that we sort of hear out in the world or on the internet when it comes to dealing with our money that just really aren't true, but that we're keep sort of being fed or told or educated about, that we may think, oh, hey, this is good sort of practice, right? These are the things I should be doing. This is what I need to have in terms of managing my, we're going to go over those and sort of dispel some of those myths and really sort of get to sort of the hard truth and the facts of how best to manage your money. So that'll be 2 weeks from now. Lisa, is there something going on next Thursday?
Yes. So next Thursday, Gain is coming back. Only this time, they're going to be presenting budget and debt management in Spanish. So for those Spanish speakers, la gente que habla español, traten de meterse para este taller para que puedan aprender un poquito cómo manejar su dinero y también su deuda. So, and then also we're going to be drawing the names for the winners for the gift cards. We'll be drawing those names tomorrow, so you guys will have that information as well.
Wow, fantastic. And that's a good thing that you guys are presenting budgeting in Spanish, because obviously I can't do that. So that's going to be a fantastic resource. Yes. I think there's a question. Yeah.
Yeah, Rosemary.
Hey, how are you guys? Thank you. Brian, at the beginning, and I didn't want to interrupt you, that's why I just kind of waited to the very end, but you mentioned something about splitting your paycheck into 2 accounts. Now, how are you really suggesting it would work better? Do you mean like manually, like splitting your money, or like somehow through your bank doing it that way?
Yeah. So let me go back. I don't know, Rosemary, if you saw this slide.
I did. Yes.
Okay. So, okay, perfect. So good question. So you notice there at the very top, it says paycheck, and then sort of split. You can split it a couple of different ways. Okay. You can actually, through your employer with direct deposit. Yeah. You could say, look, on the first of the month, I want this check to go to account number, whatever.
Oh.
And you can designate
Uh-huh.
where that direct deposit goes.
Oh.
The other thing that you could do, like you mentioned, is do it manually. So two ways there. You could walk into a local branch of your bank and say after the first of the month and you got your check, you could say, look, I'd like to transfer X amount of dollars to this other account. So you could do that at the very beginning of the month if you wanted to.
But that would be me asking them every month, like coming in and saying transfer this amount, or can I?
Yeah, it would mean you physically doing that. Here's what I do. I just do it online.
Okay.
So, for example, I bank with Wells Fargo.
Yeah.
So my income comes in to account number 1. And what I do is I then go online and I do an online transfer of a certain dollar amount from account 1 to account 2. And then I have it split.
Oh, okay.
So then I don't have to physically go in every month.
Yeah. Because I think I would be very bad at that. Trying to remember
yeah,
to
no,
split my
totally.
money.
Totally. Yeah. And that's why a lot of the banking apps are super convenient, because now on your banking app, you can transfer funds back and forth. Right. So you could split it yourself. You can deposit checks, right?
Yeah.
And designate where that check is going to be deposited in which account. So mobile deposit. I mean, there's so many great tools on the app. You can check your credit score. You can, like, so many great management tools that a lot of us would avoid or not do because we had to walk into a branch.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, the way I do it, because I'm self-employed, right? And I don't get a paycheck like on the 1st and the 15th.
Yeah.
When I make income, it goes into checking account 1. I log in, I transfer a portion to checking account 2. Right.
Okay.
Because I know what my fixed expenses are, and I know that I'm always going to have enough in checking account 1 to cover everything. Anything else can then go to checking account 2.
Okay.
So I've had times where in checking account 2, I got to tell my wife, look, you cannot spend on that debit card right now.
Yeah.
Like, checking account 2 is going to be 0 and you're going to go negative.
Yeah.
So it does take some watching, you know, it does take some coordinating. And I mean, couples do it differently too. Sometimes they just share one account and they just dump money in, and then money goes out and nobody knows who's spending what. Right. That can be tricky. And that's why a sort of more advanced money flow system can be better. Because there's going to be at least one person who's sort of watching where the money is going.
Yeah.
Right. And can tell the other, communicate with the other person, look, we can't make big purchases right now. The other thing that couples could do too is oftentimes there's one fund or one account that pays fixed expenses, and then they have their own separate variable expenses accounts. So like my wife goes and does her thing, and then I can just go and do my thing. And when my money runs out, that's it. And when her money runs out, that's it. But at least we know all of our fixed bills got paid. Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it is a little bit more work. But I think it's more beneficial in the long run, because it just helps you manage that cash flow better. And then in the situation of couples, it sort of creates one brain instead of multiple brains.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I would suggest that if you can't or don't want to try to remember when to physically go to the bank, just do it online and just transfer.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think I'll try your suggestion first with the employer and see if I can set that up. But that definitely
and they
is a
may
good
say,
idea.
look, we can't do that. Then okay, I just got to transfer it online.
Mm-hmm.
Do you get paid twice a month?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what you may want to ask them is it possible for me to, I don't know, direct deposit the first of the month into this account and the 15th of the month into this account?
Yeah. I'm
Or
gonna check
I have seen some people who have employers who will just split both checks
Mm-hmm.
into two separate accounts.
Mm-hmm.
But again, if they're like, no, like they don't want to help you do that,
Yeah.
then just, yeah, manually do it, but you would be doing it online.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Yeah.
try that.
Yeah. Good
Thank
question.
you, Brian.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yep. Well, I appreciate everybody being here this evening.
Brian.
Remember, yeah.
Vivian has a question.
Oh, sorry, Vivian.
You only have two people with this thing.
I know. Come on, Brian.
Yeah. So, Brian, my question is, okay, for the budget, like the zero budget,
Yeah.
because my deductible on my paycheck includes health insurance
Yes.
and retirement fund.
Yeah.
Do I use the net pay to start or the gross pay?
Fantastic question.
And then
So,
break it up.
yes. So with zero budgeting, you have to use net.
Yeah.
You have, remember, net equals what lands in your net.
Mhm.
What you grab after taxes, after deductions, after like Vivian's talking about healthcare and retirement and everything else. You have to do the budgeting based on not what you make gross, but after all those deductions, what you catch in your net. Right? So yes, it has to be based off of net.
Good. Because
Yeah.
that's so frustrating when I try to do a budget and they show all this stuff and it's like, well, wait a minute. It's like I already my other expenses, the retirement fund, thank heavens, is already covered by.
Yeah.
And it's less painful.
Yeah, for sure.
If you
And
think of
actually,
it,
in your situation, Vivian, you're just going to have less expenses to account for, which is great. That's going to be easier management for you.
Oh yeah, because forget college fund, child support.
Right. All
property taxes, no property yet, and luckily my car's paid off. It's like
exactly. So I would think in your scenario, you should manage that quite easily.
Yeah. Okay, good. Just as like with, it's like just trying to figure out, okay, here's my gross, which is kind of nice. But after all those deductibles, it's like, ugh.
Yeah. I know it sort of feels like then after all the deductions and everywhere else that it goes, you're not making enough. But remember, if those were expenses for you, you would need even more money. So it's a good thing that a lot of that is sort of being taken care of before it gets to you.
Yeah. So it's like someone saying you're paying yourself.
Yes.
It's also painful. And
once
exactly he starts doing the contributions again, it'll be very nice. Retirement fund.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, next week, if you want to go through this in Spanish, it's definitely not going to be me. Lisa has that covered. And then I'll be back on July 8th. We'll talk about the biggest money myths. And I hope everybody has a great 4th of July weekend. And hopefully everybody's staying cool as well.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I got my air conditioning on behind me and I left it on when I asked you that question. I don't know what it sounds like. I mean, it's kind of quiet for me right now, but it's like, I don't know if it sounds.
We can't hear it.
Oh, good.
Yeah, we're good.
So
we'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I won't be coming next week, Lisa, because I don't speak Spanish, but I'll see you guys in 2 weeks.
Okay, sounds good.
We'll see you guys.
Bye.
Bye. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.